Всім учасникам наші вітання. Будь ласка, під'єднуйтесь. Hello to everybody. Ще в нас є декілька хвилин.
Нас вже записують.
Так, я вже бачу, нас записують, це обов'язкова вимога. Володимире, ми вас вітаємо. Доброго дня, дуже раді вас бачити усіх. Вітаємо. Слава Україні! Будемо сьогодні починати таке важливе, для нас дуже важлива подія. Хвилюємося. Але у Харкові сьогодні відносно спокійно, тому ми можемо розраховувати, що проведення конференції буде успішним. Так, чекаємо ще декілька хвилин. Потім переходимо виключно на англійську мову. Ні, там будуть деякі винятки, але це може бути тільки на пленарному засіданні. І будуть вітання, будуть, як то кажуть, нам сьогодні у Харкові дощик був, це на доріжку, це дуже добре.
В Дніпрі також ливень, злива просто. Да.
Так, так. Вчора в Києві і багато міст в Україні вже тут потерпають від повені.
Так.
Будемо сподіватися, що це щось найгірше, що нас чекає.
Найгірше нашим хлопцям в окопах.
Так, це дуже-дуже складно. Тому ми вдячні хлопцям в окопах, що ми можемо зараз працювати, проводити такі заходи, такі конференції. в нас біля 500 учасників, тому якщо хоча б половина прийде на один, наприклад, учасник від кожної доповіді, це буде десь під 200, то я дуже сподіваюся, що наші лінки, що наш зв'язок витримає і все буде гаразд.
Поки є хвилинка, все одно хочеться сказати вам великі слова подяки за вашу роботу, бо наскільки це все складно і вичитати, і організувати дуже...
Володимир, ви навіть не уявляєте, наскільки складно, але...
Ні, я проводив, трошки уявляю, але наразі дійсно це...
Ні,
дійсно...
це такі вимоги підвищуються, і терміни такі, і дуже велике навантаження, але ми витримуємо тільки завдяки тому, що нам не тільки допомагає, якось бере основну частину роботи на себе Львівська політехніка. Ми так їм вдячні, незважаючи на те, що цього року це наша конференція, вони беруть участь. Ну і наша команда, ось бачите, Євген Kupriianov.
Так.
Ні, я не хочу сказати, що він якось там схуд чи зблід. Ні, працює як може.
Тобто пані Вікторія Висоцька і Василь Литвин все ж таки допомагають, так?
Не те слово, вони
Добре.
головну скрипку грають.
Добре.
Ми тільки так, щоб не заважати. Я боюся дихати у той бік. Наталія
Петрівна, так, доброго дня, колеги.
Дуже раді вас бачити.
Рада вітати вас. І теж дуже вдячна за таку можливість, по-перше, поспілкуватися, по-друге, почитати роботи своїх колег. Можливо, своє дослідження запропонувати для обговорення, бо такої площадки у нас в Україні немає. Це єдина площадка, де ми можемо, особливо ті, яких дуже мало, це комп'ютерники, лінгвісти, комп'ютерники, це ті люди, яких обмаль в Україні. І тут ми маємо таку можливість, причому дуже високого рівня. Ви його підняли на дуже високий рівень. І статус цього журналу, і статус публікації, і статус доповідей.
Я розумію, я дуже вдячна вам за такі теплі слова, але це тільки тому, що ми спільно з Львівською політехнікою це працюємо і дійсно дуже багато роботи, дійсно.
Ми вас хвалимо, Василь Володимирович.
Василь у нас з'явився.
Христос воскрес, я почув, як ви мене хвалите. Дякую.
Слава Україні, Василь.
Героям слава.
Героям слава, так. Дуже вдячні за вашу підтримку, за все. Ось такими словами ми почали конференцію, це дуже для нас важливо.
Так.
Так, ще в нас хвилина. Після цього у нас така програма, ми будемо дуже ретельно її дотримуватися, бо вона нам далася нелегко. І, будь ласка, дивіться, коли ви виступаєте всі, коли там ваші доповіді, і притримуйтесь, будь ласка, каркасу цієї програми. Зараз ми перейдемо на англійську мову, і Євген Kupriianov зробить перші такі вітальні слова вітання, і потім надасть мені слово, я продовжу, якщо він мені дасть можливість розширити екран. Євген, я зараз можу повісити перший слайд, і ви будете казати під нього, там це дуже вам добрий фон буде.
Пане Євген, вімкніть мікрофон, вас не чутно.
Жень, включи
Sorry.
мікрофон.
Sorry, I'm a little worried. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all of you. It gives me a great pleasure to announce the 11th anniversary of the international conference, which gathers professionals and young researchers in the field of computer linguistics and intelligent systems. A big thank to all of you who have not only helped in running this event for this long period, but also making it a huge success. We started as a regional conference and now we are internationally known in these two scientific areas. In this regard, I'm pleased to invite Professor Nataliia Sharonova to present the report on the history of the Collins Conference.
Thank you very much, Yevhen. Dear friends, dear participants of our conference, we are happy to welcome you to the 7th International Conference Collins 2023 in Kharkiv, Ukraine. This conference was started in 2012 as an inter-university one. Since 2017, it has been international and is held annually jointly with our partners from Lviv Polytechnic. We feel glad that we have created a friendly environment for everyone. Today we celebrate the 11th anniversary of the Conference of Computer Linguistics and Intelligent Systems. Let us introduce ourselves. Professor Nataliia Sharonova and Associate Professor Yevhen Kupriianov. We both represent here Intelligent Systems Department and National Technical University Kharkiv Polytechnic Institute. You see events. In this history line, we would like to mark out the key events of our conference. The first conference was all Ukrainian, and now we are internationally known due our contacts with Ukrainian and foreign partners. In 2018, the best papers were first indexed in Scopus and DBLP. And in 2021, the previous conference papers entered in Web on Science. Now you can see the first conference on intelligent systems and applied linguistics. This one took place in March 2012 to celebrate the 5th anniversary of our department. In 2017, the conference has become international, changing the title for Computer Linguistics and Intelligent Systems, Collins. The second international conference, Collins 2018, was held jointly with the colleagues from the Lviv Polytechnic National University. Since 2018, Silesian University of Technology and Université Paris 13 became co-organizers, thus contributing to significant expansion of the International Program Committee. The next Collins conference in 2019 saw the increase of the participants. So it was decided to organize the work into 2 sections. At the same time, the students' workshop was held. The year of 2020 was very hard. So pandemic crisis due to COVID-19 situation, the conference was held online using Zoom platform. To keep within the time limits of the program, the video presentations were previously recorded and uploaded on YouTube channel. The Collins sessions were also recorded and uploaded after the conference. The 5th International Conference Collins 2021 was the most powerful in terms of the number of and the composition of our participants. Collins 2021 gathered almost 500 participants from 14 different countries, including Azerbaijan, Germany, India, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Morocco, Poland, Turkey, and other countries. The conference was held online. The sessions of keynote speakers were broadcasted on Facebook page. The popularity of our conference has grown significantly over the past 5 years. You can see, if we compare the first and last conferences, we can see that the number of accepted publications has increased approximately 11 times. And the number of participants 7 times. It's a very good result. And this slide shows our statistics, Collins statistics, last 5 years. The columns in blue means papers received. You can see increase. The column in yellow mean papers accepted. The columns in gray mean numbers of reviews. And the column in red mean the number of participants. You can see these very nice statistics. And then last year, we hoped and believed that the next our conference will be held in peaceful time in Kharkiv. Unfortunately, the war continues. Unfortunately, but we believe in victory and hope that next time we will meet offline in Lviv. Now I can say welcome to Collins 2023. We wish all our participants of the conference fruitful work and new scientific achievements. Thank you for your attention and glory to Ukraine. Thank you for your attention.
And we thank you for your interesting historical overview. And we also share our hopes that our next conference will be held in a peaceful time and offline. And now I would like to give the word to Professor Alexander Turush, the Vice Director of National Technical University, Kharkiv Polytechnical Institute. You are welcome.
Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Дозвольте мені привітати вас нашою рідною українською мовою. Значить, сьогодні я вам скажу так, що відбувається видатна подія і в науці, і в освіті. І тому дозвольте мені від керівництва Національного технічного університету Харківський політехнічний інститут привітати вас з відкриттям цієї 7-ї міжнародної конференції з комп'ютерної лінгвістики та інтелектуальних систем Колінс 2023, яка відбувається, як вже було сказано, в цьому році в Харкові, в нашому університеті. Ми пишаємось тим, що у спектрі різноманітних конференцій, які проводить наш університет, є саме така, що поєднує в собі технічну складову, тобто інтелектуальні системи, машини навчання тощо, з гуманітарною складовою, лінгвістика, мовознавство. І таким чином ми бачимо нерозривний зв'язок цих складових. Я вважаю, що такий зв'язок забезпечує розвиток як технічних, так і гуманітарних напрямів наукових досліджень. Крім того, дозвольте мені взагалі висловити подяку нашим науковцям, нашим викладачам, вам безпосередньо учасникам конференції, які в такі складні часи не тільки забезпечують якісний навчальний процес, але й не забувають про наукову діяльність. Залучають молодь, студентів, аспірантів до обговорень найбільш складних наукових задач сьогодення. Конференція дуже могутня, я скажу так, тому що на фоні інших конференцій, яких досить багато ми проводимо, не дивлячись на ситуацію, яка в нашій державі сьогодні, це дуже могутня конференція. Більше 100 доповідей. І Наталія Валеріївна, заявлена в програмі, Наталія Валеріївна вже казала про те, що взагалі там більш 500 учасників сьогодні приймає участь у цій конференції. Це дуже і дуже показово, дуже і дуже добре. Я впевнений в тому, що в ході конференції усі учасники зможуть обмінятися думками, професійним досвідом, а також встановити, звісно, корисні контакти. Тому я бажаю вам успіху, плідної праці, миру, реалізації задумів і всього самого доброго. Слава Україні! Дякую.
Thank you very much. Now, and I have an honor to pass the word to Professor Vasyl from Lviv Polytechnic National University, our main partner in organizing the Collins conference.
Good day to the conference participants. We want to discuss one question. I invite Tatiana Stakevich to speak. Tatiana, please.
Hello. First of all, I'm so glad to see you again and again. And although still in a distant mode, but thanks a lot for the possibility to see you again and talk to you again. And welcome. And I want to express my deepest gratitude to all the participants and most to the organizers of the conference. I do know how much power and time and effort it takes to work with all the participants, to gather all the information, to review the papers, and it cannot be expressed. Well, it's gigantic work that it was done, and I'm so glad it is happening. And for the 7th time, the international conference is held. And well, thanks a lot for the participants. And here, by the way, the topic I'm supposed to say a few words, which Professor Lytvyn asked me for, is exactly the words, continues the words of Professor Nataliia that she expressed a few minutes ago, that although we have such an interesting theme, such an interesting topic of computer science, of computer linguistics, and information technologies and intellectual systems. We are working here, but we don't have students. We need someone young and powerful to support this, whom to teach, whom to express our deepest interest in the science. That is why the idea which Vasyl Lytvyn suggests, Professor Lytvyn suggests, is to remind that, well, for 5 years, the conference proceedings are indexed in Seoul workshop proceedings, which is a scientific explanation of it, that the computer linguistics is a part of information technologies, is a part of computer science. That is why from this part of students, from the younger scientists, in 2015, the applied linguistics was transferred, changed into philology, and in a different branch of knowledge, in the philology, in the humanities, the art branch of knowledge. And by this conference, by the growing interest to the conference and definite need of young scientists, the idea is to create the educational program on computer linguistics within branch of knowledge 12, information technologies. So we could have more, at least Grammarly, we could have our own ChatGPT ideas, we could have our own young scientists to continue our work. That is why, the problem are within our inter problem of our country is the idea how the state order places for students are created and separated. That is why Vasyl Lytvyn suggests, to all of us to think over, to slip over this with this idea, and maybe as the resolution of the conference, suggest, give a letter to the Ministry of Education and suggest such an idea that within university state order places for students, they might be slightly shifted some state order places for the new specialty of computer linguistics. Well, this idea, which Vasyl Lytvyn suggests, is to, we are kindly asking to consider it, and if it will be livable for you, if you think it's okay. So maybe, as I said, as the resolution of the conference, to contact the Minister of Education with such an idea. It was the idea I was supposed to express from Vasyl Lytvyn's idea. Maybe it will create the possibility for us to have the younger scientists and students whom to give our knowledge to, and new participants of the conference, and new nice students. And again, please think over this idea, and maybe some contacts to the Ministry of Education maybe will be performed at the end of the conference. Again, sincere gratitude for your work. Well, in Lviv, the weather is just fine. I hope it will be the same nice weather, the same warm weather within the conference, and have a fruitful communication. I will be a participant, and I have looked through the conference program and have found some my nice topics I would like to listen to and to discuss. Hope to see you again. So
thank you very much for your encouraging speech, and I'm pleased to inform all of you that we are ahead of our program, so we can smoothly move on to our plenary section. And the first plenary report for intelligent systems is the framework of estimation of the impact of the Russian war on the infectious diseases spreading, presented by Dmytro Chumachenko and Tatiana Chumachenko. Please, you are welcome.
Hello, dear colleagues. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see.
So, first of all, I want to thank the organizers for that important event. I believe that holding a conference today in Kharkiv shows the strength and indestructibility of Ukrainian scientists. So I'm glad to represent you results of our research, the framework of estimation of the impact of the Russian war and the infectious disease spreading. My name is Matro Chimachenko, and I'm representing National Aerospace University Kharkiv Aviation Institute. So infectious diseases continue to significantly threaten in public health, causing millions of deaths and illnesses worldwide each year. Despite advances in medicine and technology, the emergence and spread of new infectious diseases and the re-emergence of previously controlled diseases continue to challenge healthcare systems and economies globally. This persistent problem underscores the need for continued research and development of effective strategies for controlling infectious diseases. And one of the recent most significant infectious diseases outbreaks is the COVID-19 pandemic caused by the novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. And since its emergence in late 2019, COVID-19 has rapidly spread to virtually every country worldwide, leading to a massive global health crisis. The pandemic has highlighted the urgent need for effective prevention and control measures and has exposed weaknesses in healthcare systems worldwide. As such, COVID-19 has spurred a surge of research efforts to develop strategies to combat infectious diseases. On 24th of February 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In addition to tens of thousands of deaths and injuries, the escalation of the Russian war in Ukraine has also brought a massive humanitarian crisis that has affected public health. Based on the open sources we analyzed during the first half year of Russian full-scale invasion, there were 5,552 civilians directly killed and 8,500 were injured in Ukraine. A total of 2,383 deaths were extracted from different sources. Among them, 18 medical workers died as a result of rocket attacks and shelling, and more than 50 were injured. Most of the civilians killed were from Cherkasy, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Kherson, Kyiv, Mariupol, Mykolaiv, Odessa, Sumy, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, and Zhytomyr. Shelling was the most common weapon type used in 145 out of 162 days of hostilities. Attacks that involved shelling were the deadliest, resulting in 4,966 fatalities, so nearly 90% of all deaths. Hospitals were attacked on 78 days for the first 6 months of full-scale invasions, and residences' houses were attacked every day. Attacks on residences resulted in more total fatalities and injuries than attacks on hospitals. In addition, attacks on residences has a slightly higher proportion of fatalities relative to casualties compared with attacks on hospitals. It's 39.5% versus 34.3%. Finally, using low estimates from the Ukrainian Ministry of Health, approximately 24,328 people were killed by mass atrocities or were unaccounted for in Bucha, Irpin, Kharkiv, Kherson, Kremenna, Mariupol, Popasna, and Chostanets during the first 6 months of the escalation of Russian war. In addition to the civilian casualties, we identified 32 major hospitals in Ukrainian cities that were attacked during the study period. This included a maternity hospital, Red Cross healthcare facility, cancer hospital, and multidisciplinary hospitals in Mariupol. All these confirmed attacks on hospitals and healthcare facilities are reported as direct Russian attacks. We reviewed the WHO's reports and identified 445 attacks on healthcare facilities with 374 attacks that impacted healthcare facilities and included 109 attacks that impacted supplies. All different types of health facilities, such as primary, secondary, tertiary care, and other facilities were also attacked. Concerning disruption and deliveries of healthcare and health services, Pharmacy data shows that the total number of working pharmacies in Ukraine dropped by 90% between 23rd of February and 4th of June 2022. And the most critical humanitarian situation was in Mariupol, which had no pharmacy and no access to essential medicines at all. Only 13% of pharmacies were operating and dispensing medicines in Chernihiv, and 35% of pharmacies were operating in Kharkiv. However, the number of pharmacies operating in Kyiv increased, and as of last summer, 32% of pharmacies were operating. During wartime, infectious disease outbreaks are more likely to occur, possibly from delayed or interrupt vaccinations or disruption to clean source of water, as well as crowded quarters. Botulism outbreak was reported and 23 people were infected and 2 people died. The polio vaccination campaign was stopped, and 950,000 patients were diagnosed with COVID-19 during the first 6 months of Russian war in Ukraine, resulting in 8,402 deaths in Ukraine. Meanwhile, 6,800 people were also diagnosed with tuberculosis, and more than 3,000 people with HIV/AIDS. So this study aims to develop a framework for assessing the impact of the Russian war in Ukraine on the dynamics of the spread of infectious diseases. We propose a methodology for assessing the impact of Russia's war in Ukraine on the dynamics of epidemic process, and for this we propose the following steps. The first step is to develop a machine learning model of the epidemic process to predict the dynamics of morbidity and mortality from an infectious disease in a selected area. The second step is to verify the model by assessing the accuracy of the retrospective forecast of morbidity and mortality from an infectious disease in the selected area from 25th of January 2022 to 23rd of February 2022, so for 30 days before the escalation of the Russian war in Ukraine. The next step is to calculate the predicted morbidity and mortality from an infectious disease in the selected area from 24th of February till 25th of March 2022, so for 30 days after the beginning of the escalation of the Russian war in Ukraine. The fourth step is to calculate the deviation of actual morbidity and mortality from an infectious disease in the selected area from the constructed forecast. The next step is to assess the factors influencing the epidemic process depending on the infectious disease, the nature of its distribution, and the selected territory. And based on the simulation results, to identify public health risks and necessary measures to control the spread of infectious diseases. So you can see the proposed framework on the slide. And I will show a couple of cases of its applications. The first case is case study for COVID-19 in Ukraine. So for the experimental study, for this case study, we used polynomial regression model. I wouldn't stop on details on that model because it's well known, but actually we can use any epidemic models in that purposes. But from my perspective, it should be a machine learning model because it shows the higher accuracy among all epidemic models. So briefly, polynomial regression is a regression analysis in which the relationship between the independent variable, in our case time, and the dependent variable, the forecasted variable, is simulated as an nth degree polynomial function. And polynomial regression aims to find the best fitting curve that passes through the data points. So we built a machine learning model based on polynomial regression methods and applied it to estimate the impact of the Russian war in Ukraine on the dynamics of COVID-19 epidemic process in Ukraine. The model was implemented in Python, and to verify the model, we built a retrospective forecast of morbidity and mortality from COVID-19 in Ukraine from 25th of January to 23rd of February 2022. And you can see the accuracy rates for cumulative new cases and death cases of COVID-19 in Ukraine for that sample. Again, this is a sample 30 days before the beginning of the escalation of the Russian war. The next table shows model accuracy rates for cumulative new cases and deaths of COVID-19 in Ukraine for a sample from 24th of February to 25th of March 2022. First 30 days after beginning of the escalation of the Russian war, and you can see the huge difference in errors. Again, the first model showed accuracy almost 98% for new cases and 99% for death cases. And the model applied for the sample after the beginning of the escalation of Russian war is completely impossible to apply in public health practice because of huge errors. So figures on the slide shows the deviation of daily reported new cases of COVID-19 in Ukraine. The left one shows the deviation of daily new cases from forecasted values, and the right one, the deviation of daily death cases from forecasted values. So the next case study was COVID-19 in Spain. As Spain ranks 5th in the world regarding the number of registered refugees from Ukraine, and the number of refugees in Spain at the beginning of 2023 is 170,000. So it's interesting to see how the migration of Ukrainian population impacts the situation with COVID-19 in Spain. For that case study, we used extreme gradient boosting, which is a popular machine learning method for forecasting time series, including dynamics of infectious diseases. It's an ensemble method that combines the predictions of many individual models to improve overall accuracy. XGBoost is a tree-based algorithm that builds decision trees, iteratively refining each tree predictions based on previous tree errors. So the figures on slide present the results of retrospective forecast of daily new cases of COVID-19 in Spain. The left one is 25th of January to 23rd of February 2022, and the right one is 24th of February, 25th of March 2022. So on that table, you can show the model's accuracy rates for cumulative new cases and deaths of COVID-19 in Spain before the escalation of the Russian war in Ukraine. So you can see it's very high accuracy, and that model can be applied in practice. And the next table shows the accuracy of new cases and death cases in Spain after the beginning of escalation of Russian war and after the migration started, and the model still shows very high accuracy. So on the figures, you can see the deviation of daily reported new cases of COVID-19 in Spain from the forecasted values. The left one for the new cases and the right one for daily death cases. And the calculated forecast values show that the forced migration of the Ukrainian population to Spain caused by the full-scale invasion of Russia is not a decisive factor affecting the dynamics of the epidemic process of COVID-19 in Spain. So the analysis of our results, we identified 6 factors which influence the spreading of infectious diseases more. The first factor is identification of cases. So sick people in the occupied territories and territories where hostilities are taking place don't have the opportunity to seek medical help because medical facilities have been destroyed and medical personnel are in short supply. Consultations with family doctors are carried out online, and that was a problem. The second factor is diagnostics. So diagnostics is difficult due to hostilities. In the territories occupied, temporarily occupied by Russian troops, medical facilities practically don't work. There is no laboratory diagnostics, and PCR and rapid tests are not done. In the east and south of Ukraine, the territories controlled by Ukraine, including cities with more than 1 million people, such as Kyiv and Kharkiv, 2.5 to 3% of the capacity of laboratories providing COVID-19 diagnostic services is operating. And in this way, only several cases requiring hospitalization diagnosed. The next factor is registration. Throughout Ukraine, the electronic system for recording COVID-19 incidents is limited, and data are transmitted by telephone from places where there is connection. This leads to a significant decrease in reported cases of COVID-19 compared with real ones. So the World Health Organization dashboard shows the incidence of 5,000 cases per day, which is 6 times less than predicted. And the Johns Hopkins University dashboard doesn't show data for Ukraine since 24th of February 2022 at all. So it can be concluded that only several cases of COVID-19 requiring hospitalization are registered. The next factor is treatment. Hospitalization of seriously ill patients is severely limited due to the overcrowding of hospitals with wounded military and civilians. The number of specific beds have been drastically reduced due to reprofiling to provide emergency medical care to the wounded people. This results in reduced access to oxygen, and active hostilities and occupation make it impossible to deliver medicines to such territories. The sharp increase in fatal cases makes it impossible to diagnose COVID-19 after death, and autopsies are not performed. Among the internally displaced populations, the provision of medical care is complex because attached family doctors remain in other territories of Ukraine. Contacting a doctor without declaration is possible only through ambulances, which accept applications only in several cases requiring hospitalization. The fifth factor is anti-epidemic measures. So people in the territories not controlled by Ukrainian territories with active hostilities are forced to hide from artillery and airstrikes and bomb shelters, basements, and subways. These places are characterized by high population density, lack of social distancing, lack of masks regime, low ventilation, which increases the intensity of the circulation of the virus. The mask regime is not observed in connection with the introduction of martial law. It's impossible to trace, test, and isolate contact individuals in military conditions, and it's impossible to identify epidemic chains. In the context of hostilities, self-isolation is impossible, and people with symptoms continue to infect others. An essential factor in increasing the spread of the virus is the high population density during the evacuation, both in trains and at stations. At the same time, most of the evacuees are children. In Ukraine, children under 12 years of age were not vaccinated, and vaccination of children from 12 years of age began on 13th of January 2022. So the vaccination coverage of children is extremely low. And the last factor is prevention. The vaccine campaign against COVID-19 in Ukraine began 24th of February 2021, exactly 1 year before the escalation of Russian war in Ukraine, and only 36.93% of the population were vaccinated with 2 doses. And such a low level was associated, among other things, with an active anti-vaccination information campaign conducted by Russia. The population who received 2 vaccine doses on the schedule should receive a booster dose. However, in the uncontrolled territories of Ukraine and in the territories where active hostilities have taken place, vaccination has been completely stopped. In west of Ukraine, the vaccination campaign continues, but with much lower throughput. This is due to the high burden on medical institutions caused by a large number of internally displaced people, as well as the fact that part of the medical staff was evacuated to neighboring countries. And in connection with the introduction of martial law throughout Ukraine, mandatory vaccination of special categories of citizens, such as teachers, civil servants, and so on, has been cancelled, and vaccination history is not controlled. So Russia's military intervention in Ukraine in February 2022 has resulted in a humanitarian crisis and has exacerbated the COVID-19 situation in the country. The war has made it difficult to identify, diagnose, and register COVID-19 cases, and hospitalization of severely ill patients is limited due to the overcrowding of hospitals with wounded military and civilians. The electronic system for recording COVID-19 incidents is also limited, leading to a significant decrease in reported cases compared to real ones. Anti-epidemic measures such as social distancing and mask wearing are not observed due to the introduction of martial law and the need for people to hide from artillery and airstrikes in bomb shelters and basements. The chills of war and accompanying psychological factors have also forced the problem of infectious diseases out of people's mind. The pandemic is no longer the top priority of Ukraine's healthcare system. The Russian war in Ukraine is a critical factor in the new infectious disease outbreaks and exacerbates the country's humanitarian catastrophe caused by Russia's military intervention. The situation highlights the importance of ensuring access to medical facilities and supplies, maintaining and improving public health infrastructure, and ensuring that humanitarian crises are not ignored during the war. The framework proposed in this study for assessing the impact of the Russian war in Ukraine on the dynamics of the epidemic process of infectious diseases makes it possible to identify changes like the spread of morbidity and introduce timely control measures. The results obtained from the simulation have highlighted several problems that exist in healthcare systems. These results provide valuable lessons that can be used to improve the functioning of healthcare systems during extreme situations, including times of war. Mathematical modeling is essential for assessing the dynamics of the epidemic process and understanding the factors that influence the spread of the disease. Doing this makes it possible to make timely adjustments to the structure and scope of preventive and anti-epidemic measures that can help prevent the spread of the disease. When epidemiological surveillance and response systems are weakened and conditions worsen, mathematical modeling and adequate models can help minimize the consequences of any disruption in the public health system. They can also help adjust the activities of relevant services and reduce the burden of the healthcare systems caused by growing incidence, disease severity, and mortality. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer your questions. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much for interesting and very detailed report. So, dear guests, if you have some questions, if your report interesting and you would like to know much more details, you are welcome to ask the questions. So, please. There is no questions, it seems to me. And now the word has Yulia Rogushina presenting the report, Ontological Approach in the Smart Data Paradigm as a Basis for Open Data Semantic Markup.
Dear colleagues, it's very pleasant. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Зараз я спробую підключити екран. Так. Вас видно щось?
No, we can't see it for a while. You can share your screen. Демонстрація екрана. Зелена кнопка.
Я знаю, чомусь воно не спрацьовує. Так, потрібно, мабуть, щоб відключили попереднє. Так. Ще раз спробуємо. Так, зараз видно?
Yes, we can see it. Please.
Можна починати, так?
Yes, you are welcome.
Yes. Dear colleagues, it's very pleasant now in this high scientific conference in Ukraine. Now, some words about my research. This type is the basis for open data semantic markup. We analyze transformation of raw data into... Сейчас, одну хвилиночку, щось воно не спрацьовує. Зараз. Не переключається. Smart data. The goal of smart data is to provide more valuable open information that can be used to drive decision making, enable information support, a variety of intelligent applications. One of the directions of smart data deals with data structuring that can be made by semantic markup external knowledge. Semantic wikis technology combines the benefits of wiki technology with advantages of semantic approach and ontological analysis. We propose some special cases of ontologies that reduce domain knowledge according to markup goals of semantic media wiki resources. We consider advantages of this technology and problems of its practical use on example of portal version of Great Ukrainian Encyclopedia, VUE.gov.ua. A significant part of global data now is unstructured and has a high dimension. Therefore, unstructured data don't have structure that is formalized. In some cases, the structure can be present, but it cannot be used for some practical tasks where we want to use such data. As a result, the vast majority of available information cannot be analyzed automatically with the help of modern technologies and need in additional processing. There is some schemas of unstructured and structured data and means of their structuring. Smart data is a strategy of unstructured data processing that can process unstructured information to generate new reused information. Methods of smart data depends on domain and raw data specifics, but we have some basic constraints to input data information, representation in digital form, storing for a long time on a reliable medium, technical and legal possibilities for data access, descriptions of data, their purpose, origin, structure, can be transformed into formalized metadata, and external knowledge from data domain for data preprocessing. If we don't have such data, we can't make some smart data processing. Preprocessing of raw data takes into account data features, such as data source, type of represented information, text, video, audio, needs in different methods of processing. Aim of pre-processing results, human perception, or processing with some automatical tools. Volume of data, data structuring time, data changeability, possibility and means to separate data sets related to the tasks, and data consistency. Data preprocessing is aimed to realized by smart data techniques to assess and reuse large volumes of heterogeneous data, to assure the hidden rules, patterns, and relations from data, and to analyze the meaning and significance of data. Important aspect of smart data deals with data openness. But this term differs significantly for various domains. For example, personal data access for data generated in digital universe are very different from licenses of scientific publications. And therefore, we analyze different approaches, and we understand that open data is one of the problematic terms because we make some license only for some subset of data and requirements that are used only for some special tasks. Now we know a lot of examples of open data repositories, data networks, domain repositories, and encyclopedical portals. For example, Wikipedia, Wikidata. One of directions of open data information proposes a set of requirements that are known as acronym FAIR: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And this definition of open data we use as a basis to define what data we want and can to process as open one. The disseminations of the term smart data is characterized by several V properties, and the initial triad is volume, velocity, and variety, and now it expanded by variability and veracity and value. There are many other V's now, but we consider the value one. This is more important for smart data processing. But term smart data and big data are very closely used, but smart data approach can be used for any others arrays and sets of information that are not big data but need in pre-processing. Main results of smart data processing is transformation of raw data into formalized knowledge, and semantic markup can be used for these purposes. Semantic markup is a formalized linking of data elements with concepts that provide transformation of data by structuring of its content. Text definition. Structuring of unstructured data by semantic markup is one of the ways of smart data transformation because it ensures the creation metadata for individual information objects and for data as well as marking of content with concepts of the corresponding domain. Use of domain ontologies as knowledge source is
sorry. It seems to me there happened disconnection with our portal.
Problem with internet, yes.
Something wrong.
Something went wrong. Well,
Зараз підключається чомусь, перепрошую.
Ми бачимо.
Sorry. Go on, please.
Мене чутно вже зараз.
Так.
Yes, we can hear you.
Так. Я перепрошую за технічні проблеми. Видно слайди?
Ні. Завантажте, будь ласка, ще раз.
Є зв'язок?
Так.
Можна продовжувати, так?
Yes, sure.
Я перепрошую, просто проблеми якісь технічні. Так. Ну, йдемо далі. Effectiveness of semantic markup depends on some factors: understandability of markup language and the standardized notations, sufficient expressiveness of the markup language, availability of tools for processing of marked information, and expressiveness of query language for semantically marked data. Markup extensive markup schemes use ontologies as external knowledge sources. And in general case, ontology contain classes, instances, relations between them, as well as axioms. In practical use, the elements and structure of the domain ontology can be defined more precisely according to task specifics. And in general, ontology is very complex and complicated processing. Therefore, we propose to use task thesaurus. This is a special case of ontology. This has the simpler structure because it is not include domain-specific relations, only general ones, and information about these relations can be used in construction of thesaurus. Concepts of thesaurus are generated as a subset of ontology selected for these purposes, and thesaurus can include additional information about every concept. Its ways defined by task description. We can build task thesaurus on base of domain ontology and natural language task definition. And this thesaurus is not a sub-ontology of domain ontology because it has other structure and is very simple for processing. And we have less time to process this knowledge. You see that thesaurus is a subclass of ontology as well as light ontology, taxonomy, dictionary, and for any special case of semantic markup, we can select some way of processing of base domain ontology to simplify it for processing. In practical choice of external ontology, base ontology of source, we can take into account the following parameters: expressive power of ontology, volume of ontology, number of classes, number of instances, attributes of instances, etc., and correct representation of domain and user task by this ontology. If we select not relevant ontology, then semantic markup would not be useful for some particular task. Then correspondence with natural language of marked data. If we use ontology in other language that is represented by resource, by data, it can be not very useful for users. And relevant level of ontology specialization. If we use very specific ontology is useful for practical tasks. We can define formally various characteristics and restrictions of ontological source and link with the corresponding group of tasks. And then we can select type of ontology and requirements automatically. If we select some type of structure task that we use data that we want to structure, and then we can see what ontologies are relevant for this task and what ontologies are cannot be used for these purposes. We consider many variants of semantic markup languages. Znowu problemy ze związkiem. And we propose to use for these purposes the wiki technology. All main requirements to semantic markup languages are represented by wiki technology based on MediaWiki and the semantic plugin Semantic MediaWiki. These instruments, these technological platforms are used for development of wiki. Now I say about MediaWiki. They are not semanticized. Data entry in MediaWiki is supported by and editing and provides the following data structuring elements: categories, links between wiki pages, page namespaces, and templates. Semantic MediaWiki enriches these instruments by semantic properties, templates of typical informational objects, and semantic queries. And we can link some information of wiki page, text or multimedia with some other page by some domain concept that help us to define its semantics, and these semantics can be used for processing of data on knowledge level. We propose to use wiki ontology to formalize this knowledge about structure of domain that is represented to semantic markup. This is a special case. Sorry. This is a special case of ontology with some restrictions that use only specific wiki and semantic wiki elements that are linked with markup elements of this some resource. We use proposed above ontology-based models and methods to semantic markup for development of the portal version of the Great Ukrainian Encyclopedia with MediaWiki and Semantic MediaWiki. It is a very complex information resource that contains a lot of typical informational objects, a lot of individuals, and a very big number of links between them that are semantically marked. And we can integrate information from these pages automatically. Yevhen supports semantic search that improves the traditional search with the use of information about structure of required properties and relations with other pages. For example, we can search some country by the name of its capital and a person by place of his or her work, by results of this work. We can search information not as in usual Wikipedia by keywords, by many complex restrictions on their properties. For example, a period of some action or number of people in some cities, and we can extract this information in a form of ontology in RDF format. There is some statistics about Yevhen and examples of representation of this wiki ontology of this resource. And now conclusion. One of the elements of smart data technology is structuring overall data, where elements of ontology of corresponding domain are used as markup text. The requirements to such ontologies are determined by specifics of the task and the specifics of this structuring data. This research proposes several specific cases of ontologies, wiki ontology and task thesaurus, and methods of their creation that simplified semantic markup process. An important element of smart data is availability of support this wiki technology that support collaborative work with data, ensures the reuse of open data, provides a convenient and understandable user interface, has sufficient expressiveness of information representation, supports scaling for processing large volumes of data and with complex structure. In addition, the ability to integrate the technology with external ontologies, import and export knowledge is required. The above analysis shows that all these requirements are proposed by wiki technology and its semantic extension, semantic media wiki. The practical suitability of this technological environment for smart data is demonstrated on the example of the development of Yevhen encyclopedic portal. And we propose you to use this portal, and if it is interesting, it is a very big and complex information resource of modern Ukraine. Maybe that's all. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much. It was interesting to learn more about creating the information encyclopedic resources. Dear guests, please, you can ask questions to the reporter.
I have a question. Can I ask?
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for very interesting and I suppose useful presentation. But I am wondering whether you have some ontology or you only have some technology to create this ontology and have only semantic annotated text that you handle from wiki. Please.
Now we have some real ontologies for different domains, but for this resource, we have ontology of knowledge base of this encyclopedia resource, where this ontology describes typical objects of this encyclopedia, for example, cities, persons, organizations, як сказати зоря англійською?
What?
Зорі, комети і так далі, астрономічні об'єкти.
Stars?
Боліди, як вчора падав.
Cosmos stars.
We can use other ontologies from other domains.
Yeah, thank you. But your technology allow us to handle
Sorry,
only...
very bad internet.
Your technology, can you hear me? Yeah? No? Okay, thank you.
Just wait for some seconds.
Okay.
There were some.
Maybe it's disconnect.
The internet connection.
Okay, maybe it's disconnect. Thank you.
Some problem with internet.
Yeah, hello. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose yes. Hello, Sergey Lukyanovich. I'm glad to see
I'm
you.
glad to see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if in 1 minute the internet connection isn't restored, we shall move on to the next next report.
I suppose we can go to next. Yeah.
We are ahead of the program, and after this report, we scheduled a coffee break. What do you think? In what's opinion? Shall we continue our plenary session, or we can make a coffee break?
I think so.
Yeah.
We can continue without break.
Mhm.
Plenary session.
Well, then we shall listen to plenary reports devoted to computational linguistics area. And now I have an honor to invite the reporters Nataliia Darchuk, Viktor Sorokin, and Sergei Krivy to present the report on a logical linguistic model of the Ukrainian language text.
Yes, give me possibility to control the screen.
You have an opportunity of sharing the screen. Oh, we can see it.
Do you see screen?
Yes,
we see.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your possibility to present our paper as a plenary report. Our team present Taras Shevchenko National University in Kyiv, Nataliia Darchuk, Krivy Sergei, Viktor Sorokin. I try to compact present our presentation and begin with algorithm for logical linguistic text analysis. This algorithm present two stage of analysis, logical linguistic natural Ukrainian natural language analysis. And first enter the initial text stem, carry out syntactic semantic analysis of this text based on the result of the analysis input text stack, construct a table of codes and classes of verbs, nouns, and so on elements of this text. Based on the table of codes, construct a universal B for this text, select the atomic concept and atomic roles for construction, T-box and A-box, ontological knowledge basis. Give an interpretation of the universe using an information search thesaurus, carry out logical analysis of the universe. In this step, check the obtained sum of facts on inconsistency, consistency, compatibility, and so on. In the facts are consistent, then enter them into the knowledge base and create answer to queries to this knowledge base. As you can see, step 1, 2, 3 belongs to logical, to linguistic analysis, and step 4, 5, and 6 logical, more precisely a logical model analysis of result of linguistic analysis of input text. Let me some details present our approach to builders constructing on knowledge, ontological knowledge base of input Ukrainian language text. Central goal, main goal is to develop an analysis methodology of Ukrainian language text using two components, linguistic and logical, both in which are based on the formal apparatus of linguistic and analysis of logic text model. The computation grammar AGAT is an integral computation model of Ukrainian, is an example of formal apparatus of procedural knowledge representation. In this system, in AGAT system, the ontological and the gnoseological aspects complement each other, functioning together. Is a model an active text analysis automaton hierarchically solves all necessary tasks analogously to human linguist, but does so according to the rules of computation grammar. The grammar comprises two parts, morphological and syntax, as well as semantics as final stage of text analysis. The scientific novelty we see in the combination of knowledge from natural language text and power mathematical logic apparatus, which allows representation, analysis, and performs knowledge extraction from unstructured natural language text. And in Ukrainian, there are no similar research studies. Methods of structural linguistics are used in linguistic analysis modules, distributive analysis, constituency, and dependency tree construction, and component analysis. Automatic morphological analysis module uses a distributive method. Automatic syntactic analysis module relies on constituent and dependency trees, and automatic semantic analysis module utilize component analysis. Next, utilizes the results of formal grammar analysis, full automation of the logic modeling stage encounters the problem on choosing a formal logical language in which knowledge obtained on the first stage is presented and studied and depend on the complexity of the input text. Some explain this. Depend of complexity input text, we have to must pay attention the logical language for description of knowledge extracted from the input text. Depending of this complexity, we depend the choice of depend logical language. This logical language may be propositional logic, first order logic, modality logic, multimodality logic, and so on. This problem is solved in the following way, and the problem how to choose some logical language from presentation knowledge. Now, this problem is solved in the following way. Usually, a first-order predicate logic language is chosen for working with knowledge, as it is expressive enough and has well development algorithmic tools. This choice is also confirmed by the fact that the selection of high-order logical language has a high complexity of the analysis process and insufficient development tools for logical inference. Some details add to this information. We, in first order logic and use the method of semantical tableau, we can check consistency, inconsistency, compatibly, incompatibly knowledge extracted from the text. Experiments. The stage of computer language analysis are tokenization, morphological analysis, syntactic analysis, semantic analysis, logic model analysis. Now, tokenization, segmentation of letters and sequences into words and sentences, morphological analysis, part of speech and categorical grammatical information. Very important, this select atomic concept and atomic relation. Syntactic analysis, automatic construction of trees of senses dependencies, the result of which is also marked tree and subordination, attribution to each pair of words of the type of syntactic connection and syntactic semantic relation, and the level on the morphological way of what's happened.
Well, please share your presentation once again. Please share your screen, please. No, your presentation.
One moment. I don't know what's happened.
Don't worry, take your time.
Do you see screen?
Yes, we see screen. We see Zoom. We see your, your Zoom.
Yes, yes.
Okay, now we can see it.
Yes. As I say, this problem choice of logical language is solved in our approach. We use the first order predicate language is chosen for working with knowledge as it is expressive enough for description of property of extraction knowledge. Experiment semantic analysis, determining the meanings of individual sentences on their part. In logical model analysis, the translation of the input text into the language of mathematical text in order to identify contradiction, illogicalities in the expression of meaning and the possibility of obtaining information relevant to the request from it. The stage of logical linguistic analysis of the text, stage 1, morphological analysis of the given text in order to construct a dictionary of words and word forms for text are division of the set L1, L2, L3, and 4. In two cases, part of speech and categorical grammatical categories. A lexical analysis is provided with the establishment of the verbatives, the adjectives, and the nominatives. Stage 2, construction of the set object D based on the result of automatic syntactic analysis of text and stage 1 result. In this stage, the term combining several words, anaphoric, connection, etc. are found. Stage 3, comparison the set of objects with the data of the information in search thesaurus. Stage 4, constructing of the ontological basis, ontograph based on the set of object D, construction of relation R, sin classes L1, L4. The ontograph of the text is built on the basis of sentence ontograph by applying conjunction and simplification rules. The ontograph of the text is a phrase for ontological knowledge base. The dependency graph, the example of dependency graph and graph with syntactic semantic relationship between member of sentence and some relation between these members. Next. The semantic logical model gives the set table in predicative argumentative structure of the following type. This table, from this table, we select atomic concepts and atomic relation as a construction for frame of the ontological knowledge base. Conclusion from the table of the information contained in the column of the table is obtained automatically, and the result of automatic semantic analysis with the assignment of taxon codes according to the synoptic schemes is a predicate structures. In general case is an arity predicate, but we used in ontological knowledge base used only binary arity predicate, binary predicate. The predicate pair, формування каналів, action, argument one, argument second, and so on. Such method of formulating of predicative structure also identifies the elements of the text that can be regarded as insignificant from the point of view of meaning, such as play influence, after, and so on. The simplification of text occurs through the use of particles, qualitative adverbs, which are specified but a list. In contrast, co-referential connection with restore an antecedent of the text and important both of the transmission of the text, meaning and as a linking element between the sentences of the text. Some words about importance of thesaurus. An important term on linguistic processing is the dictionary component, the thesaurus of terms of the subject area. In our example, the subject area is marketing of the information search type, where each term is presented in a network, the nodes of which are terms and the arch are relationships between terms. Automatic comparison of the predicate structure obtained from the text with the terminological network of the thesaurus is the basis for building of the construction of ontograph for the above sentence. As a result of linguistic analysis, we have such ontograph of the input text. In this ontograph present some object and relation between this object. This ontograph is a central object for construction ontological of given object area. Logical analysis of the result comes to the following. The purpose of the logical analysis is verify the consistency and logical compatibility of the facts extracted from the input text. To perform logical analysis of the result of linguistics and syntactic semantic analysis, it is proposed to use the tools descriptive logic and ontologies. Because the descriptive logic have a reliable algorithm basis, and the use of ontologies is a direct way to building a knowledge base. The knowledge base accumulates knowledge obtained from the original text, but this knowledge must be consistent, compatible in a logical sense. The results of linguistic analysis of the input text presented in the form on ontograph of this text can be checked for inconsistency. To do this, it is necessary to interpret the object of the universe and determine the formal logical language in which we the check of the properties of the acquired knowledge and the generation of consequences that arise from this knowledge will be performed. Currently, the most suitably descriptive logic for performing such tasks as ALC logic and some of its extension. For this logic, algorithms for generation consequence and checking the consistency of the set knowledge represented by formulas in this logic have been developed. Now let us consider the formal definition. What kind of information represented in description logic? Description logic required to build terminology box and assertion box. Terminology box consider a definition of object constructed from atomic concepts, construction concepts more general than atomic, built by using constructors of this logic, such as ALC, the attribute language with complement constructor. In our example, we have such terminological box on channel, legality, on illegality, and so on. So this terminological box may be acyclic, maybe have cycle. But in this logic, ILC logic, method semantical tableau allows to work with cyclic, acyclic terminology. A box include some facts about object area, and this box is analyzed on compatibility, consistency, inconsistency, completeness, incompleteness, and so on. The conclusion, the combination of linguistic semantic analysis and logical modeling and ontological paradigm allows us to assert the process of acquiring knowledge, and consequences from this inference can be significantly automated. The simplification, the proposed method is seen in the perspective of develop as both linguistic and logical analysis of the input text. It is necessary to use a method of automatic construction of an information searching thesaurus of certain subject. Therefore, the task is to develop as many thesaurus as possible for different fields of science and technology. The projection of thesaurus onto specific text of certain subject will help create a semantic network of the text. Then the combination of syntactic semantic relation in the logical thesaurus will be the starting point of applying the logic modeling methods. This last assessment leads to a certain skepticism in the community of practitioners, and in particular linguistic programmers and knowledge-based administrators. Upon such criticism and skepticism, the response emerges from the described approach and the possibility of implementation in practice. Full automation of this stage appears somewhat problematic, as certain detail must be clarified by experts in the field. The expansion of ontology and the knowledge ontological base and the clarification of these concepts. This is my
Thank you.
Sorry. Some moment.
You haven't finished. Okay, we shall. You haven't finished. Yes.
One slide.
One more slide. Okay. Will you share your screen once again?
Yes. At the last two final accord of our presentation, let me enumerate some problems which are followed for our experience and experiments. First problem on information extraction. Atomic concepts, relation, terminological box, facts from the given text. As usual, the extracted relation is not complete for a successful derivation of conclusion from this fact. it causes of such another problem of precision of translation from natural language into logical language. Very precision must be translation from logical, natural language into logic language, because of this precision translation depend on result of logical analysis. Problem of recharges of ABOX, problem of derivation completeness, problem of anti-mems, incompleteness of facts, problem of partial interpretation. Some words about this problem. Partial interpretation we called interpretation such like very general laws, very general rules. For example, such rules as a state of our constitution. Each of these or such rule, very general rule, can be interpreted in a different way. And you know the interpretation of some state of our constitution, one layer interpreted in one way, second layer in second way, third layer in third way. Of such rules which follows different interpretation we call as a partial interpretation rule. Problem of partial interpretation, problem of reasoning, solvability of logical language. The language which is used in knowledge base, ontological knowledge base is sub-language, sub-language first order logic, if we use the ALC language. And for this language, all of this logical problem are solvable. Problem of consistency and updating of knowledge base. This problem must decide expert in this object area. Thank you very much for your attention. Please, questions.
Thank you. Your report was very interesting and containing many details that can arise interest for those who study the problems of structural linguistics in connection with the computer area. And I'd like to ask, and I have one question to you. Can you tell me, did you apply in practical, does this model has practical use? Did you use it in real projects?
Yes, we have any practical experience using for construction of knowledge base, ontological knowledge base. We use the OVL-DL description logic and OVL full description logic. But the central problem is build ontology from result of linguistic analysis. Unfortunately, we have incompleteness, as usual, incompleteness ontologies extracted from linguistic analysis. If we may, we have to fill this special box, assertion box, new knowledge, which is specified of object area, and this knowledge is not included in input text. Unfortunately, such situation.
Thank you. Nina Felixovna has a question to you.
Yeah, I have a question. Kupriianov, thank you for not only interesting presentation, but I suppose very perspective research. I would like to ask two questions. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You hear me?
Yes.
If you more your voice.
Okay, I try to speak a little louder. Is there some difference between apply your formal logic for Ukrainian language and for some other language? Or we can use your formal logic language for other language too?
Yes. Description logic and ontological approach to analysis of natural language depend on the source language, natural language, because this is universal mathematical instrument for construction of knowledge base, independent of the Ukrainian, Spain, German, English, and so on, maybe Swedish language. You have second question, please.
And second question is small. When you describe ontograph that you apply to the sentence, is it possible to design this kind of ontograph for the full text or for maybe paragraph?
Yes. Unfortunately, this we have problem. Such type, such ontograph, which is built of linguistic analysis, we can restructuring and adapt it for our using, because very many relation is not interesting for logical model approach, and this but this graph include central information which extract for construction of knowledge base, ontological knowledge base. No, some complexity of such analysis. If complexity of linguistic analysis, polynomial complexity, but unfortunately logical analysis is per hard complexity. Solvability of ILC logic and extensions of Zich logic well known has a complexity P hard.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you for your questions.
So, any more questions? Well, and now I would like to give word to our reporters, Olena Levchenko and Mariana Delay, to present their report devoted to qualitative and quantitative markers of individual authorial conceptualization. So please. So, Mariana, Nataliia Petrovna. Well, it seems to me they couldn't join our meeting. Well.
Євген, вони за програмою 11:30. Може перерву зробити тоді?
Dear guests, I accept proposal Vasyl Lytvyn, and let us join our plenary session at 11:30. At 11:30, yes, at 11:30. Let us make a coffee break now and join the plenary session at 11:30.
Так, це дуже слушна пропозиція, тому що в нас останній доповідач, він просив такий термін точний о 12-й годині, тому ми підлаштовувались під це. І, мабуть, і Олена Петрівна зі своєю доповіддю теж прийде на свій час. Тому ми не відключаємося, але йдемо на перерву і побачимося об 11:30. Дуже дякую за всі попередні доклади. Доповіді вони були дуже змістовні та корисні.
Dear guests and participants, we continue our plenary section, and we start with the report prepared and presented by Olena Levchenko and Mariana Delay on the topic qualitative and quantitative markers of individual authorial conceptualization. So, Mariana, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Dear organizers, dear participants and guests of the conference, thank you very much for having us here. Can you hear me well? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see you well, and we also see your presentation.
Thanks. So it's a great, first of all, I would like to say that it's a great honor and great pleasure to be here with you again and present some new findings. So I'm speaking today on behalf of Professor Olena Levchenko and myself. We represent Lviv Polytechnic National University, the Department of Applied Linguistics. And today, our today's talk is on qualitative and quantitative markers of individual authorial conceptualization. The general outline of our paper is the following. So the paper, well, all in all, in general, proposes a methodology of ideo-style research based on identifying quantitative and qualitative markers of individual authorial conceptualization. We present statistical as well as metaphorical profiles of the concept of smutok in Ukrainian, that is sadness, in general in the corpus of fiction texts, and well, also in the idiolects of individual writers. And for this purpose, we use the data from HRAC 15 corpus and subcorpora fiction, yes, subcorpora also of some specific Ukrainian writers, for example, Yuri Andrukovich, Yuri Venechuk, Irina Vilde, Sana Zabushko, and well, a number of others, so you can see them here on the slide. The functioning of the verbalizers of the concept in the writer's texts is analyzed by means of statistical data grouping, dividing population into some homogeneous groups based on a certain feature. And well, also, in addition to that, we address the specificity of the metaphorization of the studied concept and focus on the metaphorical attributes, well, in particular on metaphorical attributes of the concept verbalizers. And well, here, well, you can see the methods used, yes, and some theoretical well, provisions, foundations of our research. So by conceptualization, we mean the peculiarities of concept verbalization, which consists in the use of both single component units and multi-component compounds. The latter in turn, well, indicating to which category, in particular within individual author's worldview, phenomenon in question belongs. The relative frequency of both core and peripheral verbalizers of the conceptual domain smutok, sadness, in Ukrainian literary texts is analyzed. And well, here you have the list of the verbalizers we viewed. Here they are, well, given in alphabetical order, yes. And once again, in order to analyze the functioning of verbalizers of the concept in the author's texts, we grouped them statistically. We grouped statistical data, divided the population into some groups with common features based on, well, certain criteria, certain features, and the number of groups was approximated by Sturge's formula. Emotional states are metaphorized using a number of metaphorical models. Yes, in particular, well, we noticed the following directions of metaphorization, a characteristic of the conceptual domain of smutok, sadness. For instance, emotional state is a living being, emotional state is an object, mainly container, it is a locus or place, it is a fluid substance or liquid, it is an element, a natural element such as fire or water, well, wave. Yes, here we have wave. We can consider the conventionality of the model at cognitive level and the conventionality, also creativity of filling in the model with some verbal components. And data components are the components which are necessary for meaning making, while optional components in some cases, well, they boost metaphoricity and also pragmatics of expressions. The image of an ideo or textual concept is well created by metaphorizations, and metaphorical attributes of the concept verbalizers. And now let's move on to our outcomes. Yes, the results we received. In general, in the fiction subcorpus in HRAC 15, we found 29 verbalizers of the concept of smutok, sadness, from the list which, well, I have presented some minutes ago. Yes, and the largest repertoire, yes, was revealed in the works by Halina Pahutyak, so 17, and here those verbalizers are given in descending order, yes, of their frequency of their use. So žal, sorrow, smutok, sadness, tuha, on anguish, yes, žaloba, mourning, and others. And also the largest set was found in the text by Irena Vilde, also 17. You can see them in brackets, and also by Yuri Andruchovich, 16. And specific verbalizers are also given here on this slide. Then it was interesting to notice that in the text of the representatives of the younger generation of writers, namely Irena Karpa and Artem Chekh, this concept is represented by a smaller number of verbalizers, so 12 in Irena Karpa and 10 in Artem Chekh's works. The highest frequency of verbalizers of the concept of smutok, sadness, is typical of the text of Maria, Matios, Halina Pahutyak, Irena Vilde, Vasyl Sklar, Yuri Vanechuk. In brackets, you can see relative frequency indicated for each of the writers. And the lowest frequency of verbalizers of the concept of smutok is revealed in the text of Irena Rozdobudko, Oksana Zabushko, Volodymyr Lis, Irena Karpa, and other writers are here on the slide. You can see them as well as the relative frequency with which those verbalizers are used by them. And actually, in this table, this table summarizes, yes, relative frequencies of verbalizers. Verbalizers are given in the first column, yes, and then we have data, statistical data for frequency data for fiction text in general in HRAC corpus, and for each writer given separately. And now I would like to maybe view separately some of the most frequent, most common, typical verbalizers, and their specificity of use by writers who use them most frequently, yes. And we start with the most typical verbalizer, that is actually the noun smutok, sadness. In table 2, you have statistical data, the weight mean indicator, yes, a sample mean, the mode, median, and this data mean that, 50% of the units in the population will be less than 0.00182. And from this table, you can also see that The most frequently, Lytvyn, Smutok, sadness is used by Yevhen and Halina Pahutyak, and the least frequency by Volodymyr Lys. And now maybe let's, yes, because the most interesting is to see how those verbalizers are used actually, how they function, yes, in texts. So Yevhen assigns a number of attributes to Smutok, both stabilized and individually authorial. So the stabilized attributes include глибокий, deep, so глибокому смутку, in deep sadness, щирий, sincere, вселенський, universal, пекучий, burning. The individual also attributes, which are, well, also specific, yes, of Yevhen and, well, mark his ideal style are високий, high, and here below you can see the example with this metaphorical expression with високим смутком, high sadness. Other also specific attributes are приречений, doomed, роз'їдаючий, corrosive, жахливий, terrible. And on this slide, you can see some of the most common metaphorical models used by Yevhen. First of all, it's the model emotion is a human being, usually bird or reptile. For example, смуток загніздився у його очах, sadness nested in his eyes. Another model is emotion is an aggressive being or aggressive liquid, such as, for example, rust or acid. Смуток роз'їдав душу. Then sadness is a natural phenomena like fog. Смуток обволікав їх з усібіч. Sadness covered them from all sides. Emotion is perceived as a person. Обняв, смуток, sadness embraced. Sadness is viewed as a liquid. For example, вилити свої смутки, pour your sorrows. And well, one more interesting, well, model, sadness is an artifact, and even more interesting example, в кайданах смутку, in the shackles of sadness. Then the next most frequent verbalizer of the concept of smutok is noun sum, and here you can see statistical data concerning this verbalizer, and as we see, most frequently it is used by Volodymyr Lys and in general in corpus. And in figure 1, we present the frequency, the comparison of frequency of verbalizers smutok and sadness. So you can see, well, that there are some differences, obvious differences, yes, in the use, yes, in the frequency of use by different writers. As most frequently, this verbalizer is used by Volodymyr Lys, so we decided to maybe well, focus on his specific use of this word. So Volodymyr Lys uses sum, sadness, with the following attributes: бездонний, bottomless, безтурботний, благородний, noble, yes, зеленкуватий, greenish, пекельний, hellish, yes, тихий, quiet. In brackets, you can see relative frequency in Volodymyr Lys and in fiction corpus in general. And it should be noted that the frequency of the phrase тихий сум, quiet sadness, in the subcorpus of fiction in general, yes, is quite well, it's quite obvious, yes, and it's quite high, yeah. It's quite similar, yes, to the Middle East in general, yes, when we compare this also with other authors we viewed, and this makes us draw conclusion about the stability of this attribute in the Ukrainian linguistic worldview. And a similar observation applies also to the phrase "глибокий сум," a deep sadness. And here we just show a number of typical metaphorical models actualized in Volodymyr Lys's text. So first of all, it is sadness as an artifact. So, for example, сум наче розтягнута гумова стрічка. So, sadness like a stretched rubber band. Sadness is conceptualized as also natural phenomenon. Сум огорнув, sadness shrouded, well, like fog. Sadness is also perceived as a living being. Сум, що сидів, sadness, which sat. It is understood as an aggressive living being, something in the container, like heart in the following example. Сум роздирав левове серце, sadness tore the lion's heart. Sadness is a living being, animal. Yes, so interesting example here. Пташка суму, а може й комашка, ні краще звірина, не хом'ячок, звісно, а киця. So translation you can see here. And also sadness as a liquid, sadness as a substance. Next verbalizer is verbalizer pechal, sorrow, and statistical data presented for this verbalizer. The most frequently it is used by Maria Matios, yes, and some context of use are given here. So in general, this emotional states, yes. So traditionally, they are given color attributes. So they are used with color attributes according to the symbolism of particular color. Yes, for example, чорна жура, black sorrow. But when we look at Maria Matios's use of this word and attributes, yes, we can notice that she frequently uses hyperonym, just not a specific color. For example, колір печалі, that color of sorrow. Глибокий, deep, is a common attribute of sum, smutok, and pechal infection. Meanwhile, we find individually authorial verbalization of the typical model of the metaphor glibina pechali, depths of sorrow, in Maria Matios's works. And here are some bright examples for models. Emotion is a liquid, emotion is living being, emotion is natural phenomenon. Then next verbalizer is tuha. Sorry, something happens to my presentation. So the verbalizer tuha, anguish, most often occurs also in Irena Matios's texts, and also uses the following attributes to it, that is безнадійна, вселенська, незбагненна, одвічна, розпачлива, чорна і свіжа, чорна. And again, a number of metaphorical models and some also specific, let's say, ways to verbalize those models. Maybe I will move on to conclusions closer, because I see that I don't have that much time left, but the same way, in the same fashion, we have analyzed also the verbalizer żal, sorrow, and verbalizer nudьга, boredom. And this slide actually shows the frequency of verbalizers, the visualization, yes, of those statistical data received. So the analysis of frequency of started verbalizers is visualized in this figure and shows how significant author's deviation from mode is. And well, in conclusion, we can say that the proposed methodology is generally aimed at identifying quantitative and qualitative markers of an idiolect or idiostyle. The analysis of single component verbalizers of the concept of smutok, sadness, shows that their fullest repertoire is inherent in the idiolects of Halina Polutyak and Irina Wilde. Although the highest relative frequency of verbalizers of the studied concept is a characteristic feature of the texts of Maria Matios. Meanwhile, Irena Karpa, Yuri Andrukovich, Artem Chekh, and Andrei Kotyuha relatively infrequently refer to this concept, let's say, as to sadness. The analysis shows that a range of attributes that authors ascribe to a concept can be considered specific feature, can be considered a specific particular feature of a writer's idiolect. And well, it is important here to distinguish between so-called stabilized attributes, which are characterized by high frequency, that is more than 3 in fiction, and which occur in text of other styles also, and individual author attributes whose frequency ranges from 1 to 3. The specificity of metaphorization of a particular concept is also a marker of idiolect. So this we could notice. On the one hand, the set of metaphorical models used by particular author to verbalize a concept has been shown to characterize an idiolect. And on the other hand, we consider both metaphorical model and, well, its implementation at verbal level to be significant. For example, the model emotion is a living being, animal, well, is typical. It's typical of the Ukrainian worldview, but at the same time, the way it is verbalized, its verbal realization is one of the markers of idiolect. For example, загніздитися, to nest, yes, чи гніздитися, as used by Volodymyr Yuri Ivanechuk, sorry, and Maria Matios. Then the general conclusion which we can make is that, well, the further study of quantitative and qualitative markers of individual authorial conceptualization using corpus data, using statistical methods, really appears to be promising in idiolect, idiostyle research. So thank you for your attention. Well, I would like to, well, hear your feedback and maybe answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Very interesting linguistic analysis. Well, dear guests, dear participants, you are welcome to ask anything our reporter.
I want to make one answer. How do you think? You have a set of writers and you have some results about this. It was very interesting because this is our native language and it's deep research. And how do you think if you will add some another writers, how it will be influence in your result?
Of course, it will expand the research, the findings, yes, and the results. But as we use some statistical data, so those statistical results will, I guess, more or less remain the same. Yes, when we speak about well, some indicators, yes, of relative frequency of use of different verbalizers or models. But of course, it would be interesting to see in what way authors are different and maybe make some conclusions. What, why, yes, maybe to view authors from different historical periods and find some common ways of verbalizing specific concepts, not only emotional concepts, but, well, any abstract concepts.
Sure, thank you, thank you. I'm very satisfied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, any more questions?
Maybe one more specific question, Mariana.
Nataliia, you're welcome.
Yes, there are some polytechnics. Is there any difference, well, vivid difference, well, between gender aspects in verbalization of emotional concepts? So, for example, in male and female writers, or in representing so male and female worldview within the literary works and literary world. And have you focused on such issues?
Actually, we didn't focus on that in that specific research, but well, of course, there will be some differences, I guess, because, well, emotional concepts, they really reflect this gender issue, yes. So, but this wasn't. This was out of the scope of this research, actually, and we didn't focus on that. But I believe, and I'm convinced that some interesting, well, results can be obtained. Because, well, it is proven, as in many studies, that women and men, yes, they understand and perceive and express their emotions in different ways. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And now I would like to invite our guest, next key reporter, Piotr Blumczynski, presenting the report towards processual sensitivity in cognitive translation and interpreting studies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kupriianov. Welcome and thank you very much, first of all, for this invitation to the organizing committee. I'm immensely grateful for accommodating me. As it happens, I'm attending 2 conferences at once, so I'm at a conference in England whilst joining you remotely. I'm especially grateful to Professor Nataliia Romanishin for reaching out to me in the first place, and I'm really delighted to be joining you, colleagues. And Before I start, I would just like to extend words of support and solidarity at this extremely testing time for you and your country as you're defending your people from this horrendous aggression. And I really wish you imminent and complete victory. You are not alone. Slava Ukraini. In this lecture, which I will try to share my slides for, let me just do that now. Right, I hope you can see my opening screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Very good, fantastic, thank you. In this lecture, my aim is to propose an important, I think, theoretical intervention to further advance the recent drive towards integration of process and product perspectives on translational phenomena, and to do this intervention, to do so from a dual perspective, philosophical, but also polemical. This is a broad sort of structure of my lecture today. As you can see, we are starting at the baseline statement of the problem, and we'll be sort of climbing a sequence of steps building on the previous ones. So let me start with the problem then. What is the problem to which we have become indifferent, in my opinion, and to which we need to develop sensitivity towards? In translation studies discourse, I hope you agree with me that product and process are often mentioned in one breath. And the formal similarity of both lexemes suggests some sort of equilibrium, right? And this impression is reinforced when we consult the foundational taxonomies of the discipline. So, for example, in James Holmes's initial narrative, or the initial sort of charting of the waters of descriptive translation studies, product-oriented approaches and process-oriented ones, you can see the red square, the red circle, were neatly flanked by a third central branch. But in Torrey's diagrammatic representation of Holmes's maps, which you can see on the screen, so just for clarity, Holmes didn't draw anything, he described. And in his description, we had process, function, product, right? There was a separation. Whereas in Torrey's diagrammatic representation, you can see on the screen, process and product were brought closer together, and function shifted to a lateral position. So we have product, process, and function. This placed both product and process in a strictly dichotomous configuration, which in the last decade or so, maybe longer, has become firmly entrenched, as demonstrated by comments such as the following. So, for example, Sharon O'Brien in her book says this: while cognitive translatology has as its main focus the process of translation, debate has also taken place on the importance of a parallel analysis of the translated product, right? The argument is that by looking only at the process or the product during the research project, one is looking at only one side of the coin. And please remember that image of the coin for a second. One of the strongest voices in the discipline of cognitive translation and interpreting studies, Sandra Halvorson, likewise calls for an, quote, integration of process and product perspectives of translational phenomena, right? Equitable as this description sounds, I would suggest that we are not dealing with a democratic integration of two comparably strong independent research traditions. As suggested by the metaphor of the coin doesn't have a stronger and a weaker side, right? They are posited to be equal in value. But I think we have here a lopsided relationship in which process has been dominated, dwarfed, and perhaps even bullied by product, and certainly framed in its terms. And I'll try to demonstrate that as we go on. So consequently, what is needed, at least initially, is not integration, but empowerment and emancipation. However, my intention is not to antagonize anyone, not to criticize anyone unnecessarily, but rather encourage us to develop a more processual view, to become sensitized, to these issues of processuality in cognitive translation and interpreting studies. Precisely because of the centrality of the concept of process in this field, we should pay careful attention to how it is understood, what we mean by process. We need to take a closer look at the very foundations of our philosophical commitments, given that we're reaching into metaphysical matters, asking questions about our knowledge, the nature of the phenomena we study, and the language with which we describe them. Consequently, my critique has to do with phenomenology, epistemology, and eventually ontology. And that is convictions that not only guide our research, reasoning, argumentation, and discourse, but also precede and frame it in the first place. So here's my first polemic, a phenomenological polemic, dealing with what we observe and interact with, what we experience. To appreciate how fundamental the issues at hand are, let's consider the following passage coming from a book under a reassuring title, Translation Studies Perspective of an Emerging Discipline. Alex Bühler writes these words in one of the passages. Obviously, and I stress that, it's taken to be obvious, from interpretation as the activity of interpreting, we can distinguish interpretation as a finished object resulting from the interpreting activity. This object is a text, presented orally or in a written form. Analogously, we can distinguish between translation as an activity and translation as the result of the activity of translating. This distinction seems so basic that in stating it, it's difficult to shake a certain sense of triviality, right? Indeed, what could be more obvious? It stands to reason that the activity of producing a text and the resulting text are clearly distinguishable as different kinds of things. At least that is the obvious assumption, but I'm not convinced. Are they really? When you think about it more, the distinction stated by Bühler is suspicious in several respects. Taking his first point, can we meaningfully separate the interpreter's performance or the translator's text or translator's, not text, the translator's activity, right, as text from, can we be separated from the process of its production? Well, retrospectively, perhaps so. Right? When we look into the past, we see something performed and we see a text or an utterance emerging from that performance. We can probably say they are two different things, but in real time, I would say this separation is difficult, if not impossible, and certainly artificial. It imposes an atemporal ontology, an illusion that a flow of communication, a dynamic living event, may be studied as snapshots of frozen frames. And I'll come to it in a second. And that is patently absurd in interpreting. Think of the simultaneous processing of what we call the input and the output, right? The interpreter is constantly monitoring what they say as they listen to the speaker, self-correcting, modifying, backtracking, right? It's very hard to distinguish the event, the activity of interpreting from what is being said. Now, this is, as I said, absurd in interpreting to separate the process from the product, but in translation, it would seem it should be more possible, right? Especially that in many definitions of the difference between interpreting and translation, it is precisely that temporal dimension that is brought to the fore, right? So, for example, Kade in 1968 defined interpreting as a form of translation in which, I quote, the source language text is presented only once and thus cannot be revived or replayed, and the target language text is produced under time pressure with little chance for correction and revision. Another scholar, Habenstreit, notes that the ideas of permanent availability of the source text and permanent possibility of correcting the target text implicit in Kade's definition underlie a widely accepted distinction between translation and interpreting. Please look at the words being used here. Permanent availability, permanent possibility of correcting. It's a very static reality, right? Time does not exist here. However, if we were to take this view seriously, it would have us believe that unlike interpreters who are subject to temporal constraints, translators live in a timeless reality, in a world without deadlines, pressures, or distractions. Suspended in this eternal present, these mythical creatures, that's St. Jerome in his study, devote their undivided attention and harness their full cognitive power to analyzing a permanently fixed source text and correcting their translation of it ad libitum, right? But why, I would ask, in such a world, would there ever exist a need for correction or revision? This question exposes a crack in this idealized model. There is implicit admission of change in the system, right? Not only may a source text be updated or otherwise disrupted, exploding the myth of permanent availability. How many times have you been asked to translate a text which kept changing, which kept updating? See what I mean? Which kept disappearing. But a translator's interpretation of it will normally develop and change, of course, as will his or her judgment of a target text being drafted. Indeed, the very idea of drafting, offering successive approximations, highlights the provisionality of the target text and challenges the flexibility of a finished textual object. When I translate, my translation is very messy and fluid, right? It's not a product, it's a living organism, so to speak, right? It changes up until the very last moment. And even when I send it in for publication, there is still change. And I wish I could rewrite some things and maybe add and expand. See what I mean? At least there is the desire for the text to keep on living beyond the publication point. And that's why we have revised editions, you know, new versions, addenda, new introductions, right? These texts cannot be productively, that's another problematic word, conceptualized as static. Now, the translator, or let's start with the process of translation. It's not a linear process. It doesn't neatly go from the source to the target, as our terminology would suggest. The translator constantly moves back and forth between not just the two texts, source and language, but between multiple texts, parallel documents, earlier versions, notes, reference materials, websites, dictionaries, and so on, you name it, as well as between different ideas, interpretations, and representations. Sometimes you come to the end of a paragraph and you realize, no, I have to do it again. I didn't understand something, or I understood it incompletely. I had to rewrite it. It doesn't go linearly, right? No wonder this movement has been described in philosophical terms as circular or spiral. Drawing on Schleiermacher's hermeneutical principles, Gadamer stresses that fundamentally, that's a quotation, understanding is always a movement in this kind of circle, which is why the repeated return from the whole to the parts and vice versa is essential. Zooming in and out and coming back and forth, right? Rather than just neatly following a line. In my previous work, I applied this hermeneutics directly to translation, as I was trying to theorize my own practice. In translating, we do not proceed orderly from beginning to end, traversing along the horizontal axis. Rather, like a point on the circumference of a rotating wheel, we move forward and backward as much as up and down. Progress in translation is far from stable and linear. It normally goes through jerks, bolts, and false starts, through periods of apathy and excitement, through a series of approximations, additions and deletions, revisions and refinements. At times, the final version is not very far removed from the initial draft, but it was only reached after a range of different options has been explored. You cannot judge a process based on the product, in other words, again, right? From a strictly economic point of view, this may seem like a waste of time and effort, but the end result cannot be separated from the process that has produced it. The what only comes through the how. Now, attempt to observe or analyze a process risk reducing it to a product. And I cannot stress this enough. Processes must be experienced, lived through, rather than merely observed. And this is why a phenomenon or phenomenological awareness is crucial. Phenomena are not products. They cannot be abstracted from the processes of perception, cognition, and interpretation. Right. So far, I have argued that an inseparability of process and product is already experientially established. We know and we experience it as absurd in the practice of translating and interpreting. But even if we let that practice inform our theorization efforts, it still occurs within a much broader epistemological framework. It is here that we see most clearly the domination of product over process. The problem is, as Andrew Chesterman points out, that there is always a gap between data and interpretation. We don't have unmediated access to data, right? We always pre-select it. We always approach it partially in both senses of the word. But perhaps also between the interpretation and the linguistic form in which we choose to express it, says Chesterman in 21. He notes that many central concepts in cognitive translations and interpreting studies, including mind, brain, context, environment, are all grammatically nouns, for example, in English. And as such, they are conceptually reified, he says, which is potentially misleading. And I think it's a fair point. For example, event, activity, experience, flow, influence, change, and others, even process, are all nouns in English, right? Whose grammaticalization, to some extent, signals an underlying conceptualization. But simply equating nominalization with conceptual reification risks oversimplifying the issue. Nominalizations demonstrate considerable conceptual variation, right? You can say that gerunds, such as proceeding or developing, arguably invoke more processual images than, say, abstract nouns such as procession or development. So rather than stigmatize one word class as engendering reification, that is conceptualizing X as something, or indeed as something, I would argue that it's more important to ask what kind of thing is being profiled. This demands a more nuanced approach than simply relying on the assignment to grammatical categories, and requires that we pay attention not just to the what is said, but also how, and a range of other contextual factors in the ongoing process of semiosis. Now, several examples may illustrate my point. I have gathered the following extracts from 2 of the leading journals in translation studies. Right? I don't give names of the authors here, just the quotations, because it's sort of less important. I can give you those sources in more detail separately. But look at those. An insightful and productive way to tap into, see my slide is being, into translation process data, right? Productive way. Well, we're talking about process. Why does it have to be productive? Why is description of process subject to the framework of product? Introspective and retrospective studies have been a very productive research paradigm, lively and productive debate, a productive concept that stresses hidden dynamics of the process of translation. Read these relationships as positive and productive, and so on and so forth, right? Productive exploration of difference. Those who make these and similar comments clearly view translational phenomena as processes. I have no doubt about that, right? The articles these are drawn for relates to the process of translation and editing. Why is it then that one of the first adjectives that rolls off their tongues to express a positive valuation represents the opposite paradigm constructed around product? These are not isolated examples, I hope you can believe me. Other scholars promote the art of productive disagreement, is another quotation, yearn for productive public theorizing, and advocate competition between research traditions as productive. Why do processes have to be productive? And how impoverished is this perspective? There's little doubt that in translation and interpreting studies, as well as in popular discourse, processes are routinely judged in terms of their productivity, but not vice versa. So we don't say it's such a beautifully processful project, or what an excellent processual result you have here. These hypothetical exclamations, marked with an asterisk, violate our norms for acceptable language use and likely create a sense of conceptual confusion and maybe logical discomfort. Behind this entrenched regime of productivity lurk big ontological questions which cannot be ignored any longer, I don't think. Not least because what you find depends on what you're looking for. An epistemology presupposes an ontology, and conversely, the kinds of questions we ask and the kinds of language we use to formulate these questions will guide our selection, analysis, and interpretation of data. And I have no doubt about that. This brings us to the ontological part of the lecture. Could it be that despite its declared focus on translation process, a considerable proportion of research effectively conceptualizes process as product, thus something observable, predictable, consisting of a finite number of clearly defined stages and lending itself to an atemporal analysis? That's the key point. What many of these studies look for, and unsurprisingly find, is still a structure, however dynamic and flexible. I see this idealization as a testimony to fundamental ontological assumptions, which we rarely realize, let alone question. And yet, I suggest, they need to be questioned. Meaningfully processual research must start from re-examining what kind of thing process is. The difficulty is that even in asking this question, we need to be careful to avoid assuming that a thing has to be a stabilized ontological object, effectively a product. Instead, we need a different ontology, one in which processes are not conceptualized in relation to their productivity. From a philosophical perspective, this conceptual view or this conceptual and axiological domination of product over process may be tracked to substance metaphysics, like at least Aristotle, I would say, the dominant research paradigm in the history of Western philosophy. This results in a snapshot view of reality. I mentioned these frozen frames before, and here is an example, right? An assumption that phenomena, events, may be studied as if they were frozen in time, which foregrounds a focus on what there is and a largely quantitative perspective. It is here, I would say, that the expectation of productivity comes from, and the whole endeavor resembles studying a series of photo frames in an attempt to understand motion. Now, imagine showing the series of photo frames to an alien, to a person from a different world, a galaxy, and trying to explain to them that, no, what we mean here is what happens in between these frames, or as you combine them. It's not those that we mean, it's something beyond them. Well, these are static depictions, and nothing is moving here. You can't analyze music by pausing it. You can only experience and analyze music as it is playing, right? And I would say that the same is true for translational and interpretive processes, right? You cannot abstract them from the time in which they unfold. Right. This is a subtle but critical distinction, I would argue. In the largely material culture we are surrounded by, process, in order to be deemed worthwhile, must normally generate some sort of substance. Think of the rhetoric of knowledge production versus information processing, right? Production as generative may easily be a worthy end in itself. Okay, processing normally has merely utilitarian value as a means to an end. We don't process things for processing's sake. We want to produce something, right? That is the logic behind it. But an alternative tradition of ontological thought and valuation may be described as process philosophy. It takes as its premise that being is inherently dynamic and therefore may only be meaningfully expressed in terms of energy, activity, and the vibratory differentiations of space-time. The reality we actually live in, even though some of its aspects may appear temporally stable, is characterized by basic dynamicity, right? Best understood as becoming, occurring, or emerging. What holds for all dynamic entities labeled processes is that they are somehow intimately connected to time and often related to the directionality of the passage of time. Once you have seen it, you can't unsee it. Once you have translated something, you can't untranslate it, right? This reconceptualization of process allows us to apply to its entities traditionally conceived of as substances like utterances, messages, text, translations, their context, and of course, all living beings, including people, as well as their behaviors, reactions, and so on. What emerges from a communicative or translational process is not only a relatively stable product, but further processes of transmission, reception, interpretation, application, and so on, processed by processual beings. Even us, as organisms, are more events than entities, right? Think about the rate at which your cells are being replaced all the time. You are not a stable collection of atoms from one second to the other, right? We emerge, we occur rather than simply exist. In a way, these processual points are not exactly new, right? Some processual threads run through earlier accounts, though in recent years have brought, only recent years, I would say, have brought more comprehensive attempts to apply process philosophy to translation theory. Right. In Ubiquitous Translation, my earlier book from 2016, I offered a translational rereading of insights coming from several process philosophers and argued for a processual reconceptualization of translation. I recall Whitehead's view that the discovery of mathematics, like all discoveries, both advanced human understanding, but also produced novel modes of error. Its error was the introduction of the doctrine of form, devoid of life and motion. Against this doctrine of form, still prevailing in much of traditional popular thinking, I contend that translation is not a lifeless, motionless, atemporal form, but a complex, pulsating event. It resists attempts to reduction to simpler elements. If texts and their translations are not abstract, objective facts, but rather experiences of the perceiving subjects, temporal occasions, then perhaps the relationship between originals and their translations, as well as between authors, translators, readers, listeners, is more helpfully conceptualized in terms of energy flow, right? Carlos Murray, in his book, A Biosemiotic Theory of Translation, takes this debate further as he reverses the usual discussion about meaning and translation. To him, translation is not the problem of meaning making or meaning taking, but rather translation is the underlying process that makes it all possible. Drawing on Peirce's semiotics and also Whitehead's ontology and complexity theory, Murray insists that meaning is itself a never-ending process of creating relationships between meanings. In this conceptualization, a source text is a process, and so is a target text. The relationship between them is also a process. Meaning is not inhibited or lost with change, rather, it is change. It's a process of changes that make meaning possible. Meaning entails change, process, being in the process of being created, and is never fully created. In Murray's theorization, the energy flow that I intuited in my earlier work takes a more concrete theoretical shape as negentropy. Even though this flow should not be viewed as strictly unidirectional, it's not completely reversible either, any more than cognitive or social processes are, right? Once something has been translated, it cannot be untranslated. You can retranslate something, says Murray, but you cannot untranslate it. This temporal vector, the arrow of time, must be constantly borne in mind as we study, observe, and participate in translational phenomena. Ignoring it risks reverting to a productivizing perspective. But, and here's my key point, arguably the most important and quite literally vital implication of viewing translation as an agentropic process is its promise to offer a credible account of lived translational experience. The unique value of processual approaches comes from their focus on life and processes of living. One has to see meaning-making, that is the stuff of translation, as Murray calls it, as akin to metabolism. That ends with death only, right? The parenthesized prefix is in Murray's biosemiotic theory of translation, and my own insistence that the translational process is somehow alive, that it is characterized by natural pulsation and processual becoming, are not just rhetorical gimmicks. Whitehead cautions us that apart from time, there is no meaning. For purpose, hope, fear, energy, if there be no historic process, then everything is what it is, namely a mere fact. Life and motion are lost. If semiosis is a process like metabolism, says Murray, that ends with death only, then freezing it into atemporal flames effectively wipes it out. Despite using the same tools and employing similar procedures, surgeons and pathologists perform very different kinds of operations. How can we ensure that we study living processes rather than carry out autopsies? The problem is very subtle, because life and motion are very easily extinguished. To prevent this, we need an adequately nuanced approach to selecting and interpreting our data, to observing and experimenting, and to formulating our conclusions. Murray suggests some terminological or discursive interventions, for example, replacing the terms source text and target text with incipient sign system and subsequent sign system, so swapping basically the spatial for the temporal domain. There are other terminological issues you could argue. For example, input and output evoke an image of products bookending the process. Could they be replaced with inflow and outflow, for example? A change of vocabulary may help challenge the conceptualizations, but I'm afraid that's not enough. Beyond the what, we need to pay attention to the how in order to develop this heightened awareness, a kind of processual sensitivity and tenderness, a certain je ne sais quoi, right? Without which process research may not fully deserve its name or otherwise become radically truncated. This processual awareness needs to filter down through to translation and interpreting studies discourse, so that the occasionally overpowering emphasis on product and production is recognized and counteracted. Here's my final brief thought experiment I'm suggesting. How would you react to hypothetical thinking research, which conceptualized thinking as the production of thoughts? Or swimming research, studying the production of arm strokes and leg kicks? Would we not feel that this approach somehow misses the whole point altogether of point of thinking and swimming? I suggest that our likely discomfort and amusement with expressions such as thought production or arm stroke production compared to the familiar text, rendition, translation production results from the fact that we normally view thinking and swimming as activities of a different kind than speaking, writing, interpreting, or translating. The former are largely autotelic, right? They have their own purpose. Few people, let's say, we usually think and swim for their own sake, though of course within a broader economy of cultivating life and health, rather than to produce anything. When you swim, when you think, you don't produce, right? Few people swim to work or to the cinema. In an emergency, you can swim to safety, in which case swimming may be considered a means to a goal. But even then, describing such swimming as arm stroke production sounds just as odd as note production in playing a musical instrument or step production in walking. I hope that by registering this dissonant, absurd ring of thought, note, step, production, and similar expressions, we can become sensitized to how misguided this thought pattern is and how limiting it is. Building on this sensitivity, could translating be also conceptualized as a process in its own right, apart from the regime of productivity? Here's another thought experiment. Imagine that you have just translated an inspiring text, which allowed you to develop a new and fuller understanding of something. Unfortunately, your translation, whatever its material form, is lost and cannot be retrieved. Your computer crashed, you lost it. Despite the likely mixture of despair, anger, and frustration, would you be prepared to admit that this process was useless, wasteful, and unproductive, even though there is no product to speak of anymore? Don't translations and translational processes powerfully affect cognition, awareness, memory, affect, and so on? At the very least, translational processes, paraphrasing Clifford Geertz, have the power to make us visible to ourselves. Of course, these processes are not easily measurable or replicable in a strict scientific sense, but they are no less real and just as significant as procedures, algorithms, and other kinds of aim-oriented processes. The key contribution of process philosophy is that it validates various processes in their own right, without dismissing some as unproductive. Summing up, if we view translational processes as cognitive, then couching them in predominantly instrumental terms means settling for a very narrow, impoverished, and fragmentary perspective. Cognition is too complex to be reduced to purposeful actions aimed at producing or achieving something. Why or for what purpose do we think? Why do we learn, understand, remember, communicate, translate? The sense of value of cognitive processes go beyond any demonstrable products being generated, anything being achieved, or any even specific direction being pursued. For truly groundbreaking research into translational processes, we don't simply need faster shutters and clearer lenses, more accurate eye trackers, and more powerful computers. We also need to keep interrogating what it is that we're studying, and even more importantly, how, to make sure that what is meant as a diagnostic surgical procedure does not turn into an autopsy. And on that cheerful note, I'd like to end my lecture. Thank you very much for your patience and attention.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting to know more about translation process, its philosophical approach to it, and some of the participants and guests are certainly deal with translation process, and it would be important to know theoretical background. Thank you for your report. Is there any questions to our guest?
May I?
Yes, please, Mariana.
Thank you very much for that thorough and deep philosophical explanation of the essence of the translation process, which, well, as we see, is not as simple as it may seem. It's not just a form, yes, as you said. And in this respect, in your opinion, what's the challenge, the main challenge of machine translation? And can machines, computers, artificial intelligence ever completely substitute human beings, human translators?
Thank you very much for that question, which I don't feel competent to to address. And it's a question that many of us ponder quite often, right? In various aspects of life. Can computers ever replace mathematicians? Can computers ever replace chess players? Right? 2 centuries ago, we would have asked, well, can machines completely replace, I don't know, washing the dishes or whatever? See what I mean? If we look at translation as a process of producing something, right? As a process of production, then I would say yes. You know, I'm a translator myself, but I've been gladly and happily using machine translation over the last couple of years, couple of decades indeed, to carry out tasks that are boring or simple or tedious, under my supervision, of course, right? I don't take them uncritically, but they're immensely helpful. So I think what will happen, and what is happening already, is that machine translation will likely replace some forms of human translation. This has already, right? There's no question about that. But it will likely redefine translation as a profession and translating as an activity, right? I think my personal opinion is that we should embrace that, these developments and these advances, right? There's, first of all, for reasons of convenience, right? Because really there is no thrill in translating the same or very similar text for the 1000th time. And I speak as a translator with you know, a couple of decades of experience. I was very, very happy at some point to switch to CAT tools and, you know, to all forms of automatic translation, simply viewing it as improving my life and not deteriorating the quality of it, professionally speaking. But at the same time, there's a lot of emphasis on post-editing and pre-editing, right? If you know how to use these tools, they can be even more accurate and they can deliver what you need. But this redefines, of course, the role of the translator and interpreter, right? We become critics. We become managers of the process rather than the laborers, I would say, right? So in a way, it makes a life of the translator more and rather than less interesting. But I agree, there are immediate threats, right? In terms of employment, in terms of even training and university education. What do we teach our students, right? Are these skills that we're instilling in them, will they be relevant in 5 or 10 years time or 2 years time? But that is also true of other areas, like, you know, you look at artificial intelligence and, you know, who am I speaking to? You're experts in that field, and I know very little about it. But there's a lot of discussion about how artificial intelligence will change pretty much everything we do at universities. My own university has very rapidly adopted a new set of guidelines how to deal with artificial intelligence used in essay writing, right? But maybe the question goes deeper. Well, why are still essays the best way to assess our students? Like in the 21st century, we still need to use the same textual instruments that we used hundreds of years ago, right? So I view this as a welcome challenge to what it is that we study, what it is that we teach, and what it is that we expect. I'm sorry, that's a very long-winded answer to your very simple question, but I feel like the question you asked is very pertinent and then branches out into all spheres of life. We might not need solicitors in a couple of years' time to the same extent that we need them now, right? But yeah, anyway, we could have a, you know, talk overnight about these issues.
Yes, yes, right. Thank you. Thank you very much for your opinion. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions? Well, thank you very much once again for your interesting report, for your answers, and for your experience you share with us. Well, I have an announcement. So now we have an interval till 13 o'clock. Let me share my screen. So can you see my screen? Very well. So we have a rest till 13 o'clock, and then our work will be subdivided into 3 workshops. Today we shadowed computational linguistics workshop, then intelligent systems workshop right here, and machine learning workshop. So for each workshop has a respective link. Be attentive. We shall join our next meetings by different links. So be more attentive. They are provided under the conference title. You can see it. Now we have a rest, and all these three workshops will start working at 13 o'clock. And as a last word, I would like to thank to our keynote speakers, to our guests for interesting reports covering different problems in area of intelligent systems and applied linguistics. So we shall be waiting for you at 13 o'clock at different sections. So bye. We shall see you later.
Thank you very much, all of our participants. And now зверніть, будь ласка, увагу, що інші наші секції будуть за певними лінками. Там вони відрізняються. Але секція, яка буде за цим же лінком, вона може не від'єднуватися. Це, мабуть, Intellectual Systems, так? Так. Можна не від'єднуватися і перейти тут вже за 10-12 хвилин буде працювати на цьому линку, буде працювати секція Intellectual Systems.
Скажіть, студентський воркшоп коли буде? Сьогодні чи завтра?